What's going on, guys? I just wanted to do a quick video about urban terrain. I think I'm gonna make like a series about it. I'm gonna do some videos on gear for urban terrain, and tactics. And I think right now I'm just gonna discuss some basic considerations and tactics that you're gonna wanna implement, when you're in an urban area, if you're trying to escape from an urban area, or, if you're trying to basically get home from a disaster or some kind of crisis in a urban area. So one of the first things that, you need to understand is how most cities are set up. Many people don't realize, how most cities, the demographics and the way that, the different layers, starting from like the downtown and then going to the far outskirts and the rural areas. There's different layers, with different demographics. There's different areas, and you drive through them every day, and many people don't even notice. But generally speaking, most cities, you're gonna have your downtown area, and then the downtown area is gonna have all your office buildings. That's where all the, that's generally not gonna be many resources there, except maybe water from office buildings. You may be able to find water from, an office building. But that's generally going to be the least resources there. There's generally going to be the wealthiest area, probably the safest. There's going to be the least amount of, violent crimes in those, wealthy office areas. That's where most people are work usually. And most cities right outside of that, the core of the city, where the offices are, where the financial districts are, right outside of the core, that's where you're going to have your ghettos. You're going to have your, lower class neighborhoods, people that are going to be on welfare, stuff like that. So you have to keep in mind that if you're trying to escape from, let's say you work downtown, let's say you work in, whatever, downtown Manhattan, or downtown Chicago, or downtown Los Angeles. If you have a house that's, let's say, 50 miles away or 30 miles away, somewhere in the suburbs or a rural area, you're gonna have to go through those lower class neighborhoods, and that's potentially, in those areas, you may, run into trouble. And I'm not just trying to stereotype, lower income people and say that they're all, violent or dangerous, but it's proven that that's where most of the gangs are going to be. That's where you're going to have your, organized crime, your Bloods, your Crips, all those, gang members. They're all going to be there in those, lower class areas. So it's you're going to have to move through those areas. You're going to have to, if you're going by foot from, let's say, downtown LA, you may have to walk through like something like Compton, or if you're in Manhattan, you may have to walk through, Harlem, or something like that. You're gonna have to pass through some bad areas before you get to the suburbs, where it's a little bit better. But even the suburbs are gonna be dangerous if we're talking about, a major crisis, which is why I said that the lower class neighborhoods may actually, in some ways, may actually be safer than the suburbs, because in the lower class neighborhoods, people have a tendency to stick together more, either because they're all the same race. Let's say if it's like a black neighborhood, people are going to have a tight bond, because they face the world together. So there's not going to be as much crime amongst them. But in the suburbs, you have different people from different walks of life, different cultures, different religions, different, ethnicities, whatever. So in the suburbs, you may actually run into some conflicts there. So don't, let your guard down and say, oh, I got to the suburbs, I made it out of the city, I'm good, I just got to walk a few more miles and get to my house. The suburbs can actually be very dangerous as well, especially if people are hungry, if they're disoriented, they're panicking, they don't know what's going on. If they see you walk through their neighborhood and you got a backpack full of gear, they may try to take it from you. It doesn't matter. These could be law-abiding citizens in normal situations, in a grid up. When the power is up and everything is good. These are probably law-abiding people, but when they're hungry, when they're tired, when they're thirsty, they're gonna start getting desperate. And they see you walk by with you, and they see you're prepared. They see you have water. They see you have food. They may try to take that from you, and that's a tough position to be in, obviously, because, you may have to use force to defend yourself. So, obviously, that's not something you want to do. You don't want to hurt somebody, but you got to remember that, you got to protect yourself, and, people, they have time now to prepare and get ready. So they shouldn't have a reason to try to steal from you. They should always have, and even if they don't have anything, they should have their own, willpower and their own morality to, go out and find their own way and find a way to get their own food. So that's something to consider. But, the most important thing to remember is just that, you're going to want to stay away from the masses. You're going to want to stay away from where the crowd is going to go, because if something bad happens, the crowd, they're all going to go in the same general. They're going to go on like the same highways. They're going to try to go on the trains, and then they're going to realize that the highways are going to be congested. The trains are not going to be working. They're going to try to go on their cell phones, and the cell phones are not going to be working either. So a lot of things are predictable, because 90% of the population in this country, they're not prepared. They're not, they don't have a preparedness mindset. It's just a few small percentage of people, either they're preppers, they're military guys, or they're some other type of maybe some cops. But for the most part, most people are not prepared, so they generally rely on what the authorities are going to tell them to do. And, they don't carry food or water or, stuff like that like most preppers do. But so you have to, understand that you have to worry about not only, the violent gangs and the thugs and all that stuff, the criminal elements, but you're going to also have to worry about normal people, because normal people are going to become dangerous when they're hungry and when they're thirsty. They may justify stealing from you, or they may justify killing you to take what you have if they have a young child that they have to feed. They may justify it in their mind that, they need the food more than you do. That's just one example, obviously, but, it's just something to keep in mind. I'm not saying that you can't be charitable with people. If somebody looks like they're, injured or thirsty or whatever, by all means, you should help them. You don't want to be selfish, obviously, because, that's not good either. You don't want to be a selfish person, but you have to kind of judge that for yourself and see, if it's worth helping this person. That's kind of your judgment, but, you definitely want to be very, wary of people in a crisis, because, people are going to be, it's just human nature to look out for yourself and protect yourself. And, that's what people are going to be doing. They're going to be looking out for their immediate needs, their water, their food, their safety, so you just want to keep that in mind. So, it's, in my opinion, you definitely want to stay away from, the obvious places where people are going to be in a crisis, which is main highways, main roads, supermarkets. People are going to try to make a dash for the stores to get food, or they may go to the gas stations to fill up their tanks, whatever. They may try to get into, the subway to get home. You want to avoid those traps, because when you get to those areas, the roads may be blocked off because of traffic. The gas stations, they may have, there may be, fights there. There may be altercations. People are going to be fighting over gas. Supermarkets, same thing. People are going to be fighting over food. There's not going to be much food left. There's a greater chance that you could get robbed. If you're trying to go to a supermarket to get supplies, somebody could ambush you, or whatever, take your stuff, that you just bought. So you definitely want to avoid that. But let's just focus right now on a get home situation, and not, SHTF. If we're talking about a get home situation, going back to what I said earlier, you're going to have to move through those bad areas. You're going to have to cross them somehow. So one recommendation that I would have for you is to read online the Military Operations in Urban Terrain Manual. It's a U.S. Army manual, I believe, and you can get it for free online. I think the website that I got it at was globalsecurity.org. It's a free website. You can download the manual for free, and just read through it. You don't have to read every single detail, because it's an Army manual, so it gets really detailed. But try to read most of it. There's a lot of good stuff in that manual about. It just explains how cities are designed, and also combat tactics, in a city environment, things that you want to look out for when you're moving through an urban terrain. You don't want to you don't want to just like walk down the road, because somebody's gonna see you, and if somebody has bad intentions, they're gonna want to take what you have, or whatever, depending on if you're a man or a woman. If you're a woman, they may want to try to rape you or something like that. So you don't want to just you don't want to just like walk straight down the road. That's just asking for something. So you have to keep in mind that when you're in a city, if you walk on a main road, it's so easy for somebody to see you. And I think one of the things that you should get into a habit of is just being aware of how dangerous a city is in terms of the type of terrain when you compare it to like a forest or a wilderness setting. Actually the U.S. military considers urban terrain to be the most dangerous terrain to conduct combat operations in. And that's just use your common sense. There's so many places to hide. There's so many places that somebody could shoot you from. There's so many places that you can get ambushed. The way that cities are set up, it's just natural. There's natural funnels that they funnel your movement, and they create natural choke points. And at these choke points, you can get ambushed. It's much harder to do that in a forest or in a natural setting. Because you have to find a specific terrain feature that would create a choke point like that, something like a river or a cliff or something that's going to funnel your movement and create a choke point. And in a natural setting, you can avoid that. You can just go around it. You can bypass it. But in an urban terrain, it's very difficult to just bypass these choke points because they're everywhere. So like, if you're walking down a block, you're basically being funneled down the street, and on either sides you have buildings, building on your left, building on your right. Inside those buildings, you have multiple windows. There could be somebody, just waiting in the window looking for somebody to pass by. And if they see that, you may look like you have money, you may look like you're, a well-to-do person, they may just decide to, shoot you. They know that, let's say it's a crisis, they know that there's no police presence. They may just decide to shoot you, take your wallet, take your stuff, whatever they need to survive, and that's it, If you're a woman, it may be worse, they may try to rape you, or whatever, kidnap you, there's a lot of things. So you just got to keep in mind that the urban terrain is, in my opinion, and also the opinion of the military, it's the most dangerous terrain to operate in. And aside from just, operating in it from a combat perspective, just from survival, there's not a lot of resources in urban terrain. There's not a lot of water. There's not a lot of food. There's not there's nowhere you can procure food. You can't gather anything. There's very limited things that you can do to get food other than, taking it from, or looting or something, you know what I mean? So there's not going to really be any opportunity to, hunt or something like that. I mean, of course, you can trap squirrels, stuff like that. You can set up snares in a park, but you're probably not going to want to do that if there's a crisis, because, it's just going to be too dangerous. So, so it's good to just be aware of your city, and the city that you live in, or the city that you work in, or a city that's nearby. You want to know, where is the core, where are the bad neighborhoods, and then you kind of want to just mark things on a map, areas where there could be resources, places where there could be some like parks or something, some big green spaces where you can go there to gather water, or to, trap some squirrels, or, gather food. You may want to mark that on your map. Also, those parks are not going to be heavily, there's not going to be a lot of people going to them, because it's not the first thought. Most people's first thought, if there's a crisis, it's going to be go right on the highway and get home as fast as possible, or, go to the supermarket. They're going to go right for the low-hanging fruit, so that's where everybody's going to want to go, and nobody's going to think, oh, let's go to a park, it's not the first thought, but going to a park may actually be smart, and if you could set up your route, your get-home route, in such a way that, periodically you're moving to different parks, so let's say you have to walk home like 40 miles, and on the way, you can set up your route so you're going to these different parks on the way home, So let's say like every 10 miles, there's some kind of city park, or, a municipal park that's got a pretty big green space, and if you find a place like that, that'll give you an opportunity to, refill your water, possibly, catch a squirrel, or some other type of, animal if you're hungry. But, obviously if you have a get-home bag, if you're prepared, you should have enough calories to get home on what you have inside your pack. You're not going to really want to be hunting anyway, or trapping, because it's just going to take too much time. So just be aware. I think the general thing is that you want to be aware that, cities, they have natural choke points. They're very dangerous. There's many places that somebody could shoot you from, or, ambush you. It doesn't necessarily have to be shoot you. They could ambush you in numbers. They could have like 15 or 20 guys, and you could walk down the block and they can see you coming, and all of a sudden they surround you, and they say, give me your backpack, give me your stuff, give me your wallet, we want everything, and that's it. And if you're lucky, they'll let you live, but that's up to them, obviously. So just be aware that cities are very dangerous. There's a lot of choke points and funnels in the cities, and you want to try to avoid those choke points as much as possible. If you can move through alleyways, if you can move through other means that avoid, like, walking in the middle of a street. That's your best bet. But that'll be another video. I'll talk about movement, how to move through a city to avoid detection, and to stay on a low profile so you don't get ambushed by somebody. I'm gonna make another video just on that, but for this video I just want to kind of introduce the main concepts behind the series, and just some main points that you need to consider when you're preparing your get home strategy and your get home bag. Now, another thing that people, I notice they make mistakes, is that they focus strictly on the get home bag and packing their get home bag, but they don't have a strategy or a plan or any kind of tactical plan to get home. How are you going to get home? Where are you going to go? What's your plan? A backpack is just a piece of gear. It's not going to just magically get you home. You got to have a plan. Ideally would be to practice that plan a few times. While right now, while we have electricity, while everything is good, before things go south. You don't necessarily have to walk the whole thing, but just take your car and drive it. And just because you see something on the map doesn't mean that that's how it is in reality. Maps change, streets change, the maps are not updated, the satellites are not updated. So you always want to get there on the ground, put your feet on the ground, put your boots on the ground, and just and do some recon. Get to know your route that you're going to take home, that you're going to get home with, and really spend a lot of time planning how you want to get home. So let's just quickly summarize what I talked about so far. I'm going to start a series about urban terrain and how to get home in an urban environment, because I believe that there's too much focus on wilderness survival and bushcrafting and stuff like that, which is great. That's definitely very good, but most people don't live in the wilderness. Most people live or work in a city or near a city. That's just the way our society is. Unless you're a rancher or you live in Montana or something like that, certain circumstances. But most people, one way or another, they're going to have to be in a city at some point in their life. Even if they don't work in the city, they may go to the city for, pleasure, for recreation. They may go to the city for a parade, or to go to a bar, to go to a restaurant, just to walk around and enjoy. So, it's good to have. I think that there's too much focus on the wilderness side. And when you consider wilderness survival to urban survival in my opinion is much more complicated and much more dangerous than wilderness survival. Wilderness survival, in my opinion, is very simple. It's mostly about protecting, taking care of your needs, food and water mostly. There's going to be situations where obviously you got to protect yourself from animals, and then you have the elements to deal with. But when you go into an urban terrain, you not only have to deal with your immediate needs, but you're going to have a much higher environmental risk, because you have all kinds of industrial centers nearby. If the power goes out, you may have to deal with explosions of industrial buildings, which could release chemicals in the air. You're going to have to deal with terrorist attacks, possibly, nuclear, biological, chemical attacks, stuff like that. So your environment is much more dangerous, not including the actual weather. And then, obviously you got your weather to deal with, but, your actual environment is much more hazardous. Plus you got to deal with people, so that makes it much harder, and there's less resources in an urban terrain. And, it just makes sense to talk about urban survival more, and getting home and discussing this topic more, because that's where most people live. The majority of human population is in urban areas, and it's a very overlooked part of prepping. So that's what I'm gonna do. And also, I want you guys to just think about how your city is laid out. You know, where are the industrial areas? Where are the high crime areas? You know, where's the core? Where's the downtown? I mean, most people know this stuff already, but you know, really spend some time, look at a map, and then also you want to, you know, prepare some type of a get home plan. You want to have a plan, you know, a strategy, a route, how you're going to get home. And you don't just want to have one route. You want to have multiple routes, you know, at least like 3 or 4 different routes that you can take. And ideally, you want to have that committed to memory. You know, if you can memorize your route without having to look at a map, or at least memorize most of it, that's the best thing. You know, and you also don't want to mark your routes on your map, because if somebody finds it, they find that map, or let's say you forget the map somewhere, or you lose it on the way, somebody could find that map and they can try to ambush you. So, you know, you don't want to mark routes on the map. You know, you definitely want to avoid that. You know, those are some considerations. And then there's also the choke points. You know, you always want to just be aware that, you know, the urban environment is loaded with choke points and places where you can be ambushed. And in a crisis situation, you know, it's just going to be very dangerous to walk right down the street. So you got to consider your movements, and you want to be stealthy. You know, you want to be as stealthy as you can. You know, so every city is different. You know, you're going to have to adapt. You know, you're going to have to use your brain. You know, use your common sense, your God-given, you know, intelligence that God gave all of us, our survival instincts that He gave us so we could live. You know, use that to your advantage. You know, don't panic and don't get into like a tunnel mode. Use your mind, use your common sense, and just try to avoid those choke points. You know, and many times it may require you to, you know, do some things that may get you dirty. It may, you know, you may have to go through like a smelly alleyway or something like that, where there's, you know, dumpsters and homeless people or something like that. But it's better than walking right down Broadway, you know, with a backpack on. So I'm gonna cut it here for now, and I'll be back with another video. I'm gonna go into more details. All right, bye.